Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another webinar from aplaceinthesun.com. My name is Andy Bridge. Today, we're here to discuss the options for moving to Portugal post-Brexit. The UK is no longer part of the European Union, and finally, that story has, one stage of that story has come to an end, and we no longer enjoy the automatic right to move and reside in Portugal or for any other European country for that matter. But unlike British scallops and oysters and other bivalves, there are options for us to breach the borders and to move to sunnier climes. So today I am joined by a perfectly formed shoal of experts who are going to help us navigate the ebb and flow of the Brexit navigational tides. So that's enough of that pescatorial analogy. Let me introduce you, first of all. I'm delighted to be joined by Simona Di Muro from the British Consul in Lisbon. Good afternoon, Simona, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Delighted to be here today.
Well, we're very pleased that you are able to join us. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you are, and what you do in this important role that you do for the country.
Thank you, Andy. So I'm based in Lisbon. I'm the British Consul for Portugal. I work here at the embassy, which is where we are today. We also have a consulate in Portimão, and we also cover consular matters in Cape Verde as well. So I've been here for a while. Some of you will know me, and yes, we've had quite a lot of work, obviously due to Brexit, but also due to the circumstances with the pandemic last year, which continues into this year. So lots of things have been happening, but hopefully, I hope that people will still consider Portugal as somewhere to come to.
Absolutely. And how does it work with resources then at your sort of level? I mean, given the pandemic and given Brexit and all the questions that must be fired your way, do you get extra resource and extra help to cope with that workflow?
So we have a contact center that actually takes all of our calls and emails. So yes, we've had to bolster the team there. The contact center is our own. They're our colleagues, and we also have a global response center that works out of hours and over weekends. And yeah, I think staffing wise, we've been quite stretched at times, but we're getting there.
Great. And next up is a long-standing contributor and exhibitor at our live events when we're able to stage them from the Algarve. Good afternoon, Paula Morales. How are you?
Good afternoon, Andy. Good afternoon, team. I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your business and how you interact with British buyers and what you do for them.
To start with, I have to tell you, Andy, that majority of my clients, they are foreigners, but more than 50% of those clients are British. So I really have a very strange connection with British clients. So what we used to do until now was representing foreign British clients on their interests here in Portugal, helping them, having their buying their properties, setting up their business, but that was very, very easy to do, helping them set up with residencies. But now I foresee that there will be more work to be done due to the fact that from now on a visa will be required, and probably set up to become a resident in Portugal. They will need much help with our Foreign Affairs services.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And next up, from Blevins Franks, we have Gavin Scott, who is a triumphant Scot following the stunning Scottish victory over England at the weekend. Good afternoon, Gavin.
Good afternoon, Andy. Thank you for the introduction and the reminder. What a great weekend. Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about Blevins Franks and your role within the business, what you do for a British audience. So,
well, if I start with my position here, I'm the senior partner for Blevins Franks in Portugal, and I've been here since the year 2000, so now in my 21st year. And what we do at Blevins Franks, for the last 40 years, we've been looking after British expatriates as they leave the UK, and we take them on a journey that says, well, these are the things we have to do before we leave the UK from a financial planning perspective. These are the things you have to have in place before you arrive in Portugal. And when you arrive in Portugal, this is what the tax landscape looks like. And so we can talk about investment planning and succession planning and the way that the UK and the Portuguese laws do and don't interact. So some of the tax rules are really great because we've got double tax treaties, but some things like succession are more complicated because of the different legal systems that we have in place. So that's our role, is to guide clients through that move and make the fiscal move as easy and straightforward as possible. Great,
thank you, Gavin. Well, as always, I'm determined to stick to the matter in hand, but just before we do that, Paula, let's pick up the situation for a holiday homeowner. So for somebody who has a holiday home, is happy just to go to Portugal for 2 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time, there has been a significant change post-Brexit, hasn't there? Can you just talk us through that?
Yes, there is, because before we could enter and exit the country without no requirement of visa. Now you're still allowed to do that, but you will be only allowed to come in each 6 months twice, and on those 2 times you cannot exceed. This is not as straightforward. You shouldn't exceed the 90 days. Of course, there is a possibility, and this is what I think is the very good news, is that once you're in Portugal, if you want to extend your stay, you can. There is a possibility for that. And there is a possibility to extend up to 90 days, which I think would be ideal to everybody. But bear in mind that if you request an extension over those 90 days where you can circulate in between the 26 countries, the extension only allows you to stay in Portugal. So if you exceed the 90 days and you request an extension, that extension only is valid for Portugal stays.
Okay, so Simona, you might be able to add for this. So I was under the assumption this 90 days out of 180 days. Could I arrive in Portugal for 90 days out of a 6-month period and then leave again for 3 months and come back for 90 days?
Yes, that's right, Andy. Yes. So it's 3 months out of 6 basically, and the way it's calculated is that you calculate the 180 days from the day you entered the Schengen area. And then when you get to the end of the 180 days, then you go into the next 6 months, and therefore you can come back into the Schengen area.
Okay, wonderful. And let's give people some reassurance, Paula, on things that haven't changed. And the conveyancing process and the process for a British person buying a Portuguese property, that's not been directly impacted by Brexit, or has it?
The process itself of purchasing not, but before, for example, a British person would not have to have a Portuguese fiscal representative. Now you have to have one. So our office created a company many years ago to do fiscal representation of clients. And when the obligation of having a fiscal representative ended up, I kept that company as dormant, and now we have reopened to help people to represent them fiscally when they need. The way of obtaining the fiscal numbers also had changed a little bit. This morning, Claudia, one of our assistants, was telling me that the tax department is requesting, apart from having the power of attorney, from the people granting the power of attorney to this tax company that we have, they also request a declaration of appointing the company as a fiscal representative. And apart from that, the company has to produce a declaration stating that we are happy to represent them fiscally. So little changes, but the process itself did not change.
Okay, and that 3 months out of 6 months, Simona, there has been some rumours swirling around that could potentially get relaxed at some point into a straight 6 months. Are you hearing anything on the ground in the loftier position that you employ?
In my loftier position, no. Maybe it's not that lofty. No, we haven't heard any of that. The Schengen area rules have been around for a long time for third country nationals, and you know, we now fall into that as UK nationals, as we're no longer part of the European Union. So that will stay. When the Citizens' Rights Agreement was being looked at, it was a decision, a bilateral decision between the UK and the EU, that the UK would be considered as a third country like all other countries and would fall under the Schengen area rules. And that's where we are. Yeah.
But that agreement does allow for multiple visits within a 6-month period, as long as they are not more than 90 days within 180 days. So you could come and go multiple times.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so it still allows you that, but it's just from the very first time you enter to the last time you exit, it can't exceed 90 days. Okay,
so for a lot of holiday homeowners, that will suit them. Obviously, if somebody wants to spend 4 or 5 months over the winter, it doesn't suit them. Is there an option? Paola referenced there an extension. Is there an extension beyond the 180 days possible?
Well, I think Paola probably knows a little bit more about that. I know that you can request short-term visas. Our understanding, certainly when we discussed this with CEF, which is the border agency, was that you had to have very specific reasons as to why you were asking for an extension. So I think just, you know, wanting to stay longer in your holiday home was not one of those reasons. They were quite clear. But I don't know, Paola, if there's anything else that you know on that.
Simona, I agree 100% with what you are saying. Yes, you have to specify those reasons. But we will try our best to help our clients and try to make their cases strong cases in that sense to extend.
Okay, well, that answers a question that was sent in. Thank you all of you who sent in. We had a lot of questions before this event, so thank you for your contribution. Jerry Spencer was asking if there was any way around that Schengen agreement. So there might be exceptional circumstances, but the best answer we have at the moment is 90 days out of 180 days. Paola, he also asked a question about British people living in Portugal before Brexit, but didn't get round to getting residency in time. And this was a point brought up by another questioner as well. Is there anything that you would be able to add on that specific situation?
To be honest with you, Andy, we tried to do as much as we could for all our clients. We had, on the last week of December, we were making people residents. I have a lady at Castelo Branco that for some reason she couldn't manage to do her residency. She didn't count with our help. She wanted to do it by herself. But I think that they might be able, as long as they prove that they have been residing in Portugal before Brexit. But to be honest, I really don't know how the process is carried out. But I was told by this client that she had her papers into CEF and with proof of that she's been living in Portugal before the 31st of December, that they will grant her the residency. To be honest, Andy, this is something that I'm not really very aware of.
Yeah, Simona.
But perhaps I can come in there. So absolutely, Paola, for people who were here before the 31st of December with the intention of residing, they are actually protected under the withdrawal agreement, even if they didn't manage to get their certificate. So I think that's an important point. What we have stressed to everyone is that it's really important to try and keep as much documentation as possible to demonstrate that you were here in Portugal before the 31st of December. And that could be, rental agreements, bank statements where, you can see where people have gone shopping, Lidl, Pingados, whatever. What we do know is, and we've been in very close contact with CEF, the border agency, is that there isn't a process at the moment for all of those people who didn't manage to get their certificate, their residence certificate before the 31st. So our advice to those people is just to sit tight. They're covered under the withdrawal agreement, but to sit tight, and there will be a system for them to be able to register in the near future. So that's something, and as soon as we know, we will have that out through all of our channels, including our Facebook page, Brits in Portugal. So we let them know. But I think the reassurance for people is that if they were here before the 31st of December and they can demonstrate that, they are protected under the withdrawal agreement.
Well, that is very good news and reassuring news. And I think it's it's timely at this point to say that not all of this is clear and decided as yet. There's quite a long list of stuff to sort out between the UK and the European Union. So it'd be unfair of us to ask you for definitive answers on absolutely everything, Simona. But a point from that would be they'd need to prove residency, that they were living in Portugal at the time. We've had a number of questions in about people who own holiday homes, existing holiday homes, but have not been residing in Portugal. That wouldn't help them in any particular way, I guess. They'd need to have been resident before the 31st.
Well, that depends on those people. If they feel that they want to remain in Portugal and they want to reside in Portugal, then they would fall under that. I think it's a lifestyle decision for some people, whether they actually do become residents in Portugal, or whether it is just a holiday home for them. So there is a difference there, and that's for individuals to decide. But if they were here up until the 31st and their intention was to take up residence, I know that a lot of people had appointments to go to town halls, which then had to be cancelled because they could no longer do face-to-face, or, you know, there were lots of restrictions due to the pandemic. So for those people, I would imagine that they're the ones who want to continue living in Portugal, and therefore just to hold tight, and there'll be a system for them to do. But for those who didn't, who were just here in their holiday home, then, you know, once they leave and get back to the UK, when they come back, they will be under the 90-day rule.
But it wouldn't apply to somebody who had a holiday home in Portugal but was living in the UK at the time that we departed from the European Union.
No, you had to be in Portugal.
Had to be residing in Portugal.
Or can demonstrate that you were residing in Portugal for a period of time before the 31st. So, you know, I know a lot of people went back to the UK for Christmas, but actually they'd been in Portugal for quite a long time before that. So as long as you can demonstrate that, that's the important bit. Right,
okay, thank you. And Gavin, by its nature, a lot of this content we're going to cover today is fairly weighty stuff, and the last thing we want to do is put people off. Obviously, the property market's particularly slow at the moment with the double whammy of Brexit and the pandemic. But do you see the British appetite for living and buying property in Portugal disappearing anytime soon?
Andy, it's an interesting question, and I think we're all taking a view on it at the moment. But I can tell you anecdotally that not all estate agents are finding it difficult. There have been a number of agents down here in the Algarve that have sold a good number of properties already this year. And if we think that the British love their holidays here, they've got holiday homes here, they've got retirement plans that were made long before Brexit came along, and Portugal hasn't lost any of the advantages that it has over its neighbours. So if we think that we've got a level playing field across Europe, it's not that Portugal's being disadvantaged in any way through Brexit. The same applies to Spain and France. But Portugal retains, I think, a number of advantages over its neighbours. If you think that we've got quality over quantity, we've got a very positive tax regime that encourages British nationals to buy property and come and live in Portugal. And if you take all of the natural things, the lifestyle, the sunshine, and so on, and include in it, of course, referring back to your introduction, the fish, then that's definitely going to attract people here. If the fish isn't escaping and going on lorry loads back to the UK, we're going to have more of it to enjoy ourselves. So I see this as an opportunity that actually, and we'll see just the same numbers of people. Somebody mentioned earlier about lifestyle, and I think that lifestyle will drive it rather than the difficulties of obtaining a visa, which won't be so complicated once we get into that process. People ask, Gavin, should I come to Portugal because the tax system is better? And I think you'll come to Portugal for the lifestyle, and then we'll work the tax implications and the fiscal arrangements around that. And people still want to come for sure.
I have a round of questions later on asking if you were a fish, what fish would you be? But we'll just park that for the moment, Gavin, and you can have a little think about that one. Paula, so we've covered off, let's say, the more casual holiday homeowner who is satisfied with their 90 out of 180 days. So let's move on to the core subject today and explain some of the routes towards, some of the visa routes towards residency in Portugal. And we have to say that Portugal is one of the more attainable countries in Europe when it comes to getting residency rights. So why don't you talk us through the golden visa, which a lot of people, I think, will have heard about, but might be vague on the detail, the current situation with the Golden Visa and what might be changing with the Golden Visa.
Golden Visa program, as we all know, with the investment of 500,000 euros on a property and receive residency in exchange, that definitively will change, unfortunately. It will remain until the end of June of this year, and from the 1st of July until the end of 2022, we will enter into a transition period, which will be more directed to attract people to less populated areas where you can buy your property, but you will not find more than 100 people per square kilometer, or the Portuguese domestic gross income is lower 75% than in other areas, so for poorer areas. I think that during the period of transition, we will still can buy properties in the Algarve, properties in Lisbon, properties in Porto, but amounts of the investment, I believe they will change. This is the investment through the property, because in relation to the rest of the possibilities, forming a company, those transferring capitals, those are the ways of receiving the Golden Visa. Those didn't have any change yet.
So that links nicely to a question we had in from Mike Holobowski, who said they're planning to apply for a Golden Visa, but want to know about which areas they will be able to search for a property. And I guess certainly on our website, on aplaceinthesun.com, you can't search by properties in an area of less than, what was it, 100?
Yes, so 100 people per square kilometer.
Per square kilometer. Yeah, we don't have that information, unfortunately. But is that information available anywhere?
Specifically on certain places. We have a program in Portugal called 2020. And on this program for 2020, there is a list of places where you have the possibility to invest. So the ones in red are the councils with low density, populational density. If people want to contact us, we can tell you, because again, there is a full list then of places,
right,
where you can invest. Then we can help you and guide you through those areas.
Fantastic. It's at this juncture we can say that on our website, on aplaceinthesun.com, we have a summary blog about this event with contact details for Paula and for Gavin, and for some links for the British Consul and various resources, government resources that are available. We will be following up with a much fuller, more detailed series of pieces which will appear on the website over the course of next week. Gavin, the Golden Visa doesn't make you a tax resident, does it? That's one of the prime advantages of it.
No, that's right, Andy. No, really, I think the Golden Visa is designed to attract people who want to use maybe Portugal as a base or to access the Schengen area, but not necessarily for remaining here permanently. And quite often we have to differentiate between the civil right to live in the place and what the fiscal responsibilities that then come with that. So in terms of you're using the Golden Visa and you come and stay here, or any form of visa, making Portugal your home. Simona mentioned people who maybe had holiday homes and were spending time here towards the end of the year, maybe with the intention of remaining. Maybe they just hadn't moved to their forever home or whatever that might be. But making your home, if that holiday home had become their home, they were selling up in the UK and that was going to become their home, then technically they became tax resident in Portugal at that time. So you can separate the civil from the fiscal. And the fiscal side says, if you've made Portugal your home, you're tax resident here. If you've spent more than 183 days in any fiscal year, so 1st of January to 31st of December, you're tax resident. And the consequence of that tax residence is that you now owe Portugal all of the tax on your worldwide income and gains. One of the issues in this is not just arriving in Portugal and saying, well, I'm here and I want to be deemed to be tax resident, but of course you have to shake off tax residence in your home country. It may be under the rules in the UK, for example, the statutory residence test, that you've spent more than a set number of days, and that number of days is determined by the number of ties and connections you have. So the more ties and connections you have in the UK, the fewer the number of days you could spend there. So you may spend more than, for example, 90 days in the UK, and that classifies you as remaining UK resident there, but more than 183 days in Portugal. And therefore we need to come to the double taxation agreement and say, okay, which tax authority is going to have its hand in my wallet this tax year, and who's it for? But what I would always say is go back to that lifestyle thing, Andy, where we say enjoy the lifestyle. Think about what the lifestyle is, and leave it to your advisors around you to come back and say, okay, this is the most tax efficient way of setting out your affairs to live in Portugal. And in Portugal in particular, you could be in a position where that lifestyle is funded by the Portuguese government because of the tax incentives that they are prepared to give for you to come and live here, which is very nice indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll come on to those, I'm sure, slightly later. So just to be clear then, under the Golden Visa, can one choose to be tax resident in Portugal, or that's not a possibility within the Golden Visa? One would stay tax resident in wherever you had your fiscal responsibilities.
It's possible, and tax isn't something that we elect to. It's something that becomes de facto. So if those things all came into line, you've got your Golden Visa that allows you to be here. If you then make it your home, or you stay more than 183 days, you will be a de facto tax resident of Portugal and subject to pay your taxes here. You may still remain tax resident somewhere else, but you've now fallen into the Portuguese system. So yes, is the answer.
Okay. But a benefit of the Golden Visa is that you don't actually have to spend long in Portugal at all in any year, if that is your choice, if that's what you're looking for, almost like a convenience visa.
Absolutely, and it's maybe a good time to mention. So with the Golden Visa, you don't automatically become tax resident. You may either elect to be or by default become. However, with some of the other visas, and I see some questions coming through to the panelists and so on that refer to this, where we're talking about, well, I last year picked up my residencia certificate from the local town hall, the Camera, and these people have in effect declared themselves as tax resident, whether they realise it or not, by saying their intention is to live permanently in Portugal, and therefore I need my residencia certificate. So you're telling the Portuguese authorities that you will be here for more than the 6-month period, and in which case you become de facto tax resident at that point.
And what is the minimum requirement number of days one needs to spend in Portugal with the Golden Visa?
With the Golden Visa, I'm not sure. I think it starts, Paula, you could help us here. I think the first year you have to spend
7 days.
7 days a week?
7 days, that's all. Okay. So in summary on that one, it's 500,000 invested in a property. There are some situations where that could be a lower value, am I right in saying, Paula?
Yes, it will vary in between 280 and 350, depending if you are in an area, a remote area, as we said, with less than 100 inhabitants. And if this property is more than 30 years old, so if it's more than 30 years old and located in one of these areas, you could qualify with an investment of 280,000. If you will decide just to go for one property in Lagoa, for example, or in Lisbon, for example, that was requalified, then more than 30 years old, then you also can qualify with an investment of 350,000.
Okay, thank you. But just to be clear, this visa is running its course, and you need to be pretty quick, which brings its own challenges at the moment in terms of selecting and purchasing a property. So we'll move on from the Golden Visa. We hope we've covered most of your questions there. I do see a lot of questions coming in, which we will try and get round to as well. But let's crack on. Simona, the D7 visa and the route to a residency permit. Can you take us through the key attributes of a D7 visa, please?
Sure. I mean, obviously, visas, it's not something that we manage. That is something that is a Portuguese, it's national law. So you can find lots of information on CEF and indeed the British consulate. But just in general terms, the visa, the D7 visa is particularly for people who have their own private income or have a pension. And the way it works is that you need to start the process in the UK through the Portuguese consulate in London or in Manchester. Actually, the Portuguese consulate has a fantastic page that you can go to, and it gives you all of the information. And then once you've got your residence visa, you can come out to Portugal, and then you can apply for a residence permit, which then means that you become a resident in Portugal, and you can access the National Health Service. So it's an entry visa, if you like. There are lots of other visas as well, depending on people's circumstances and what they want to come and do in Portugal, whether it's work, study, etc. And I know Paula knows quite a lot about that. But yeah, the D7 is a residence visa. So for those, there's a couple more categories under that, but it's for those who have their own income or are in receipt of a pension.
Paula, could you expand then on the D7 visa in terms of the period that it gives you to reside in the country, and what specifically what criteria you need to meet?
For the D7 or
yes.
for any? Okay, for the D7, it's important to know that apart from, as Simona said, and very well, you have your own income that allows you to stay in Portugal. It's important that you have a place where to stay. You have a home. It can be rented or it can be your own home. You enter into the country with a valid document, the passport with the visa. You enter with a ticket of entrance and exit. You enter with insurance for all your stay, during your stay in the country. Before you said, and very well, you get your authorization of residency. So it's very important to people to know that if they now want to come and live in Portugal, they have to have means of living, and they have to have a proper accommodation.
Okay, and do those means have a specific amount, a specific total that one needs to have in the bank?
The minimal amount would be the equivalent of the minimal national wage. It's also regulated in specific legislation, but I highlight to people that, for example, if you want to come and live in Portugal and you have an income of 700 euros, but if you don't have an accommodation, maybe 500 euros will be for the accommodation. So will you qualify only with 700 euros? This is a question that people need to make to themselves, because when they have to show means of living, they, apart from that, they will have to consider all these circumstances. And apart from that, the insurance should also cover your health care during your stay in Portugal. So probably I would consider that count with minimal 1,000 euros. Minimal.
1,000 euros per month, and that would be for the first individual. And then if you were coming as a couple, is there an offer? Do you buy one get one free, or do you need a certain amount of money to cover the second person?
I believe it's 50% of the first. And if there are children, an extra 30% for each child.
And crucially, this income must be generated not so much passively, but outside the country. So it's investments, it's a pension, it's profits from a business, those sorts of revenue streams.
Yes, yes, yes.
Paula, can I charge my children rent? That's part of my income.
I'm not going to help you on that one.
Gavin, do you get involved then with, I guess it's suitable for a retiree then as well, the D7 visa, is that correct? Presumably you deal with retirees coming in or previously coming in on that visa and looking to retain that revenue stream?
Andy, we haven't done in the past, but I think that will be the key to it now. And if you imagine the majority of our clients coming from the UK, that's the process. They're retiring and they're coming to enjoy the lifestyle that Portugal has. And so I'd imagine that the D7 will become the most popular because it's designed to accommodate those that have got passive income. And of course, the Portuguese tax system is looking to attract those people as well, that passive income. And I'm sure we'll go on to talk about the non-habitual residence regime. So that'll highlight the fact that the D7 works very, very, very well for in that circumstance.
Well, why don't we do that just now? The NHR, that wonderful acronym, and non-habitual residence scheme. Why don't you take us through the detail of that? That's something a lot of people might have heard about, but maybe are shaky on the detail and wonder if it has in fact changed post-Brexit in any way. My granny always said, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And it's one thing that that people say, well, you know, why would they have this scheme that allows you, you know, so many fiscal advantages? But if I start with with that why, so the Portuguese know that we've got a diminishing population here in Portugal. It's reducing. The young people are going overseas to university. They're finding life in Germany and London attractive. And they're not coming back to Portugal. And one of the things that Portugal has to do to stimulate the economy is bring more people in. So they said, if we've got a fiscal policy that provides favourable tax concessions for a period of time, this will provide people coming in, retiring on their D7 visas, they're buying property, they're paying the property taxes that are due at that time. They're employing Paula to deal with all of the conveyancing that's required there. There's an estate agent that earns a fee. And then they go into the local restaurants, and everything that they buy and they spend their money on, the government's collecting 23% VAT on. So it stimulates the economy incredibly. And people say, well, it won't last. Well, we're now in our, I think, 11th year of the programme, and we've been through all of the different colours of government in Portugal in that time, and every single one has supported it. So then we say, well, we understand why they're doing it. Now, who qualifies for it? Anybody qualifies. People say, oh, it's only for British nationals to come, or it's only Norwegians or whatever. It's open to everybody, including Portuguese nationals returning who have maybe been working in Angola or Mozambique or wherever they've been working around the world, provided you haven't been resident in Portugal in the previous 5 tax years, you qualify. And that's really all, that's the only qualification really that there is. You have to have the right to live here, obviously, either through a visa program or through nationality, but just not being resident for 5 years. So we then say, okay, well, what are the benefits then? Why would we take this up? And the benefits break down into 3 or 4 points. Firstly, if you come for a high value occupation here, and again, it was designed to say, if you're a big company like BASF or Shell or Texaco, come and build your research division here in Portugal, come and manufacture something, bring the brains of the world and Europe into Portugal, base them here, and we'll charge them a flat rate of 20% income tax. So it's very attractive to set up a business here and bring employees in under those conditions, a flat 20%. It has to be a high value occupation, but there's a very, very long list. And Paula will tell us that in the last year, they've reduced the descriptions in some of those, again, to make it a little bit more flexible. They've also turned from a position of saying you have to qualify and we have to tell you, to one of self-declaration. If you say that you qualify and that you fit, you can submit your taxes on exactly that basis. So that's a flat 20% on income tax rates. Then on pensions from April last year, it was 0. If you were here before April 2020, there was no tax at all. Your pensions were exempt. But today the regime says 10% flat rate tax on overseas pensions coming into Portugal. And then you've got further exemptions on things like certain dividends and interest income, where these are completely exempt for taxation for the 10 years of the non-habitual residence regime. So your 10 years starts in the year that you arrive, it runs for 10 years. If you leave, go out the country and come back, the clock keeps ticking. So you've got that 10-year window. But during that time, you enjoy all of the benefits.
The devil, however, Andy, in all these things is in the detail. So, and if I give you an example that might explain how or why you have to be, you have to really examine exactly where your assets are and how they're affected by this treaty. If I'm coming here to Portugal and I own a share, say in British Telecom on the London Stock Exchange, then the way the income and gains of that share will be treated depend on the double taxation treaty exists and whether the tax would originally have been paid in the UK. So in the example of British Telecom share, British Telecom pay a dividend every year, and there's a dividend credit already built into that pricing within the UK, so the tax is paid. When I receive the dividend in Portugal, it's exempt from tax on the basis that tax could have been collected in the UK. However, holding the share as an individual in Portugal, I'm a non-resident of the UK, therefore I can buy and sell that share without any tax consequence in the UK. And because tax could not have been collected in the UK, the tax is payable in Portugal. So it's not a tax-free holiday. You have to look at how the individual transaction interacts with the double tax treaty that exists in Portugal. And if we plan that correctly, then Portugal can be very, very tax efficient. The devil's in the detail, so look at the assets themselves and how they work. But in simplistic terms, it works incredibly well for retirees on the D7 visa.
So is it an apt summary to say that your granny was wrong?
In this case, she was wrong, absolutely.
Normally she was right, I'm sure.
She also told me not to carry all my eggs in one basket, but if you use the right basket, that can work too.
Nice. I see what you did there. That was smooth. Paola, you touched on healthcare, and I guess now the situation is, your e-hit card is just going to lapse as a holiday maker at some point, and then I'm not clear what happens with that. But let's think about somebody looking to reside permanently in Portugal. What sort of private healthcare options are there, or indeed state options? I guess the state options are dictated by what type of visa you end up securing.
Correct, Andy, correct. But if you, so as you know, I'm a very big fan and defender of our national healthcare system. Because fortunately or unfortunately, I had to use it directly or through the family. I've been saying during all the webinars and exhibitions and explained how much my father needed. And it is really very, very good, our Portuguese health system. So the ones that come and live in Portugal and that will contribute to the national health care, to the national insurance, they will benefit on the national health care. The ones that come, for example, with the golden visa, they will have to hire private health care. Private healthcare also, there are very, very good policies, and they get cheaper or expensive depending on your age. So yesterday, I requested the company with whom I have my private healthcare, and I'm a big defender of the Portuguese National Service, and now I say where I have my healthcare. I will have to explain this. This is due to the fact that when I'm from Lisbon, and when I moved down to the Algarve, unfortunately, the services, the healthcare services in the Algarve were very poor. So at that time, we would have only one big hospital in Portimão and another big hospital in Faro. The little village where I live doesn't even had a local doctor. So I decided to hire a private healthcare policy. At the time, I started paying 50 euros per month. And now I'm paying around 65, more or less. In 2017, I had to submit myself to a very urgent surgery, and I paid only 250 euros for that. So depending on the age of the person that comes, so around my age, you will know that you will be falling in 60, 70 euros for a good policy. Over 60 euros, you should count for something, the lowest one, 580 euros per year. and the very, very, very complete and very good ones, 1,673 euros. So you can get very good coverage, bearing in mind these figures.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And so that's not an off-putting amount for lots of people. That would help them. If I was coming there as a and qualified for residency, though, is there a way of contributing to the health system there and being able to use the health service? Is that an alternative in time? Yes. Obviously, once I become resident.
Yes, you can contribute to the system, and I believe the contribution, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think is around 120 euros per month. Is that so, Simona?
So as a resident, actually, if you're not working in Portugal, there is no contribution because healthcare is residence-based. So if you're a resident, you might be working in Portugal and therefore, yes, you'll be contributing to the system. But if you're a pensioner, for example, or you've come here and you've got your residence and you're part of the NHR or whatever, you access the health centre in the same way that, the health service, in the same way that any Portuguese person would access it. You would pay those, the fees that, everybody has to pay unless you're exempt, €4 to see your family doctor or €5, something like that. But that's it.
Okay, thank you, Simona. So just to summarise, because we're covering quite a lot of ground here, and naturally we're jumping about a little bit. So we discussed so far. We discussed a golden visa, which would be a route to residency if one chose. Equally, we discussed the D7, another alternative, which would be a route to residency again if one chose. We've had a lot of questions in about the D2 visa. Paula, if you want to pick this one up. Alan Parker asks. We're looking to start a new business in Portugal later this year. Are we allowed to enter Portugal as usual and just stay for the 90 days to do this? And then his term, register for citizenship. So I guess he's referring to what sort of work visas would be available to him and whether the process needs to be started out of country or can be done in country.
The D2 would be, it's foreseen on the Article 60 of the Law 23 of 2007, which regulates the entrance, the permanency and the exit of foreigners in Portugal. The D2 is directed for people that can self-employ themselves, like me, an architect, an engineer. I think in English, probably the best words would be service providers, or for entrepreneurs, people that want to come to Portugal and set up a business. I'm afraid that the process is not the way that this gentleman has in mind. The process needs to start back in the UK. The person needs to go to the Portuguese consulate, fill in numerous forms, authorizations, declarations, and they have to bring with them a business plan, a very good business plan, where they explain what kind of business they have in mind to develop in Portugal, viability of this business, and if they qualify, they are approved this pre-qualification to analysis of the circumstances of this person. If they qualify positively, the consulate will schedule a meeting and they will come to the embassy for this meeting. If they are approved, then they will receive the D2 visa on their passport for 4 months. So they were allowed to enter in Portugal, and once they are in Portugal, they may have to set up their business during that period. And the second stage of this process would be scheduled after the company is formed, their inscription is made at the Social Security, the company started at the fiscal department, or if it's a service provider, is inscribed at the competent entity, also had made the inscription at the Social Security and started its activity with the fiscal department, then it's a time for them to schedule with SEF. And if they have fulfilled all the criteria, then yes, they will have the authorization of residence in Portugal.
Do you know what period that is granted for? And is there any requirement to, I don't know, employ local people like there is in the US when you go for one of those sorts of visas?
On this D2, not really. You can have a one-self company, one-person company, and you can be the only person on that company. You are not obliged to employ people under this visa. As we said before, for example, on the golden visa, when you set up a business, there is a minimal amount of 350, and there is the obligation of hiring 5 people. Not on the D2, it's much simpler, the process. But again, in Portugal, there is no requirement for that, but as there's no requirement on how much you need as social capital of the company, but we have to bear in mind the following. Serious companies have to have a capital according to it. I cannot form a company and be taken seriously with €1 capital. So again, I think that the minimal capital that a person that should look into that is at least €5,000.
Okay.
But I do apologize. Again, as we said before, when we were going through the D7, in this case, people also need to bear in mind it's not just having the social capital to form the company in Portugal. They have, again, to respect and to have means of living in Portugal. So on those 5,000 or 10 or what amount of money you need to create your company, bear in mind that you will need to have a home, you will need to have means of living in Portugal.
So what will that be an additional requirement, that proof of, I guess your business, well, business plans don't always do what they're supposed to do, but would you also have to show some other income, or could you be reliant on that business to provide that income?
No, you have to show that income at least for the first year to receive the visa, and then to renew if your business goes well, and then you have a way of showing it. Otherwise, this is the reason I said it's foreseen on the Article 60, but is also connected to 77 and 89. So sometimes it's not just one article that rules one thing, you have to connect them in a way of doing the interpretation. And the 77 is the one that gives us the general conditions for people to request the visa or for the visa to be granted.
Thank you, Paula. Very thorough. Thank you very much indeed for all your preparation for today. I know there's a lot of new information that people are having to get to grips with, and that's only going to continue. Gavin, something that let's talk about tax again. You used a lovely phrase earlier that I'm going to employ next time I'm speaking to HMRC, which is shaking off my tax responsibilities. I'll mention you by name and give them your email number, your email address. So talking about shaking off one's tax responsibilities, which we don't advocate, obviously. Russell Breen sent in a question saying, having obtained a residence visa and become a tax resident in Portugal, will you be liable in Portugal for capital gains tax on a property sold in the UK?
Okay, no, that's an interesting one. So if he's arrived in Portugal and he has non-habitual residence status, then we look back at the property and we say the tax obligation arises on the sale in the UK initially. And actually this one, we can apply this thinking to a number of questions that I've seen popping up, Andy, which would be around things like military and police pensions arising in the UK, a capital gain from a sale of property arising in the UK, or dividends coming from a UK company that we're directors of. So if we think the initial taxing point is the UK and the UK has the taxing right, now how do they treat that taxing right? And the question you've asked is that because it's a principal residence, it's taxable but exempt in the UK. And therefore, they will now look at the residence of the individual, and the individual is resident in Portugal. Under the NHR regime, we're able to say it was taxable, even though it wasn't taxed in the UK. Because it was taxable in the UK, it's now exempt under NHR. So the easy answer is to say the individual selling the property here wouldn't be subject to any Portuguese additional tax he's dealt with it all in the UK. And the same thing arises for things like your military, police pensions, teachers' pensions. Those are arising in the UK, and because they're government schemes, they will always be taxable in the UK. The individual at the moment can set their UK allowances against those. The problem there now, though, is that when we now look at the residence of the individual receiving that money, we've looked at the taxation on it arising. The residents, because they're in Portugal, they're now subject as residents of Portugal to tax on that income. If they don't have non-habitual residence, then we look at the tax that they've paid in the UK, and they'll get full credit for that. And if they paid £100 of tax in the UK, and the tax rate in Portugal would have been 120, they've got the additional 20 to pay in Portugal. Under the non-habitual residence regime, though, that income would be exempt, and therefore they can ignore the 20 until the 10 years are up. And that applies to most of the questions that are coming through. If you think it through logically, if it's a UK business and it pays its corporation taxes, when it pays its dividend out, where is that individual? If the individual is not living in the UK, they're in Portugal, then as an individual, their individual tax is then to be paid. That dividend was taxable in the UK through the corporate mechanism, and therefore under the non-habitual residence regime, the individual can receive that dividend here in Portugal and it's exempt of tax. In all these things, again, thinking about all those same questions, when we talk about it being exempt, it's not tax-free. So if I've received 100,000 of income, wouldn't I be lucky? 100,000 of income, and it's all been exempt, that next €1 that isn't exempt will pay the full scale rates in Portugal. So it's not a totally tax-free, it's about exemption. And you've got to make sure you plan that through. And so I'd say in all of these things, especially with the additional complications that we have now post-Brexit, that people should come back to Paula, make sure they've read up on the British Embassy website on the rules and the strategies around it, and make sure they've taken professional advice in the move. The hardest job that we have on this panel is undoing some of the things that people have done with the right intention, but they maybe just haven't followed the right steps. So follow the right steps, and it's actually an easy path.
Graham Harvard has just messaged to say his head hurts. I don't know whether it's been drinking or he's just been paying close attention to what you've been saying. But the truth is, it's a complex subject.
Quiet and drink his gin.
So next week we will publish some more information on aplaceinthesun.com, and we will indeed use your questions to conjure up some case studies, and we'll go to our panel. And I'm sure Gavin, to get some assistance with that, and Gavin's details are published already on the blog on aplaceinthesun.com for you to make contact if that's appropriate. So yeah, you are right, Gavin. A lot of those questions are covered off by that scheme. So if that property, I think you made the assumption it was a primary residence. If it had been a secondary residence, which would attract capital gains, then that would be a different.
Yeah, so what happened in 2015, George Osborne introduced capital gains tax for non-residents. Up until 2015, Gavin Scott living in Portugal, I could own property in London, buy and sell, and I had no capital gains tax liability in the UK. From 2015, George Osborne said, that's not fair. Everybody will pay capital gains tax in the same way. So what happens now is that the capital gains tax again is due, but if I've owned the property for 20 years, then only the last 5 years are taxable in terms of the gain. So I can either divide that gain and pay 25% of the going rate, or if I can prove that I had it valued in 2015 and that the value hasn't changed over that period of time, then I may have little or no capital gains tax to pay in the UK. Because it was taxed in the UK, I either get the credit for it in normal circumstances in Portugal, or under NHR it will be exempt. So you just follow the logical process through it, and I apologise to Graham. It hurts.
Here's a question Mike Hay asked ahead of the event, but I have seen a number of questions coming in on a similar theme, and it's about travelling to Portugal with your possessions, Simona. Has this all been decided yet? I mean, if I wanted to drive down to Portugal with a van full of, my high-class IKEA kit that I have at home, apart from my ham sandwich obviously getting confiscated at the border, would I be able to take through my bully bookcase?
So Andy, I think it's slightly different in that if you are Portuguese or if you are a resident and you've lived outside of Portugal for the last 12 months and you're coming back, then I think there are, I think you're exempt in that there's certain forms, etc. And again, the Portuguese consulate has all of that information, then I don't think you need to pay. However, I know that one of the questions that we got precisely from Mike was that he's not a resident. So he's a third country national coming to Portugal. So the expectation is that, yes, he will have to pay, I'm afraid, custom duty on what he's bringing in. But again, this is, as Gavin said, you know, people do need to make sure that they've looked this up, that they've been in touch with or read all of the stuff from the customs department, AT here in Portugal, and that they know exactly what it is that they need to do. There's certain forms that you need to complete to indicate what you're carrying, etc. And if you follow that, then things should go smoothly. But he might still have to pay.
And Paula, I don't know if you've been approached by any British clients yet about, I don't know if this is directly within your remit or not, about professional qualifications. We've had a number of questions sent in. There's one specifically from Tracy Pennington, who is a nursing student and would like to move to Portugal at some point. I guess there is going to be an issue with the recognition of all sorts of professional qualifications in the UK that one wants to transfer to Portugal in this case.
Andy, to answer to this particular lady, I've called first of all to the nurses bar, and they direct me to the Portuguese Ministry of Education. So the qualifications must be recognized. I'm not sure. This was what was told to me on the telephone. Maybe Simona might know more about this. But these qualifications should be recognized by this entity, the Ministry of Superior Education in Portugal. And then this person would have to inscribe herself on this bar. And then, yes, she could be in conditions to work. I have my personal experience because part of my studies were carried out in Latin America. And I came to Portugal for university. And when I came, I passed through a similar process. So I had to get recognition of all my studies. Then I had to do exams to prove my qualifications. And then I was able to enter to university. So this is something that I don't know if there are any agreement yet. Maybe Simona could help us more with this.
No, I don't think there are. I know certain qualifications will be accepted. I think it depends on what it is, whether you're a lawyer. I know that there's lots of different legal scenarios around all of this. So I don't have a definitive answer on that one, I'm afraid.
Simona, right at the top of this, you referenced your responsibilities covering Cape Verde as well. Do I assume they also cover Madeira? We've had a question in from John Griffin, who's looking to move to Madeira. Do the same rules and restrictions and visas and everything apply to Madeira as they do to Portugal?
Absolutely, Madeira is part of Portugal, as are the Azores. So yes, so that's all Portugal. So the same, the same rules apply. Cape Verde is a different country, different rules in Cape Verde. Okay,
and he questions about if he moved there and he was told he'd have to open a bank account with the local bank and he wouldn't be able to have a UK bank account. That doesn't sound right, does it, Gavin?
No, it doesn't sound right that you cannot have. You'll want a local bank account, I would think. You want the convenience of having a local bank account. Of course, people are worried about banks these days, and I share that concern. So I wouldn't hold any more than we need for a monthly or quarterly basis and top it up in a current account. People are getting letters from their UK banks to say that some of the UK banks don't think they can look after their clients now that they're overseas, because there is no financial services agreement in place yet between the UK and the EU. So there's some confusion over that. What I'd be saying is, if you can't, you may not be able to retain your UK bank account in the high street UK, but all of the big banks will have offshore equivalent branches or subsidiaries. So if you're in Barclays or Lloyds or whoever in the UK, you might want to consider moving to Barclays, Lloyds, Isle of Man. That gets you out of the UK system. Isle of Man, Jersey, Guernsey. It gets out of the UK system, but it will give you sterling accounts if you still have sterling expenses or pensions and things to be received in sterling. And in fact, most of those banks, as they're dealing with overseas clients, you'll be able to run euro and sterling accounts side by side and be able to move money in between. So it's a sensible form of planning. And what I would say is that anybody thinking about the move, or in fact already in Portugal, it's a very good time to review your all of your assets and say, are they in the right place? Am I holding too much money in banks where the maximum guaranteed amount is 100,000 euros? Could I be using European Union structures, insurance company structures, where, again, going back to my granny's eggs in baskets, where there's no risk with the basket, we've got full guarantees, no institutional risk, but you can hold larger amounts there safely in products that are regulated within the European Union and approved within Portugal for tax compliance. So it's a good time to sit down and say, and we've been doing it with a lot of our clients, which accounts have you gathered up through the years that you're now holding on to? And actually, this is a good time to start to shed some of those and say which ones are appropriate for the assets that they're holding, cash and so on, and for the purposes that I have now, predominantly working within euros in Euroland.
Thanks, Gavin. I know you mentioned pensions earlier on, but we are getting a lot of questions in about them. If you could just run through that again, particularly UK state pensions and their treatment if one gets into Portugal on one of the various visas.
Is there so the UK state pension is paid gross in the first place. So if it's a tax question, it's paid gross, and the tax then, as a recipient of that pension, you'll be paying your tax in Portugal. And if you're under the NHR regime, then it would be exempt. From a UK perspective, it would be added to any other UK income. So again, that may take you through your nil rate band. And if you've got other UK arising income, you could still have a UK tax liability. I think one of the questions I'm asked on state pension is, will we get the increases in future years? If you move to Canada or Australia, that's not the case. Effectively, your pension becomes frozen. And the stated intention of the UK government at this juncture and at whatever time it is today is that, yes, that will continue. And it's been promised, Simona, for a period of time, but not indefinitely. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's 15 years and then it will be reviewed, but it could be reviewed and agreed that it continues. Okay,
thank you both. And a specific shout out to the S1. We haven't mentioned the S1. I mean, we've talked about healthcare, but in last week's webinar that we did on a similar subject for Spain, we had some good news, I think, from one of the panelists on the S1 form for retirees. Paola, is that something that you're aware of, that the S1 is still available for people of retirement age?
I would pass that one to Simona.
Simona, let's pass it to Simona.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Can you just tell people what it is, please? And
so the S1 is you're in receipt of a pension. You're in receipt of a state pension. So it just means it's more to do with your healthcare and who pays for your healthcare. So when you're in receipt of an S1 form, it just means that you get your healthcare here in Portugal, but actually it's then it's billed to the UK, because it's the UK that will cover your healthcare. So that's what it is. So if you are in receipt of a state pension, you do need to go and register your you need to get in touch with the DWP, Department for Work and Pensions. You need to get the form. You need to go and register that with the Portuguese Social Security. They will then issue you with a letter, and with that letter, you go along to your health service, or your health centre, and you register. And when you register, you register as an S1. This is for state pensions, and I know that it can cover some of the other people as well. So yeah, so that's the process for that one. Sorry, I've just got a message coming up on my screen, which is slightly worrying me, which my computer's running low, but I hope that you've got that. We have kept you
longer than we said we would, so apologies for that. But just quickly on that then, does that mean that you wouldn't need then to take out private healthcare?
So I think you would, so for any entry visa now, and again, Paola, you might know more about this, for any entry visa into Portugal, you will need to demonstrate that you've got a health, health insurance. And I know that they stipulate that the cover is a minimum of around 30,000 euros. So you would need to have that. However, once you've come to the country and then you've applied for a residence permit, and once you have that authorization, you can then go into the SNS, it's called, which is the NHS, the equivalent of the NHS in Portugal. You could retain that, your health insurance. You can still do private health insurance. Nobody's stopping you from doing that, but you do have automatic access to the National Health Service because you are a resident. Okay.
Anything you want to add to that, Paola? Or I know Simona's done a very thorough job on that.
She did, indeed.
Okay, well, Paola and Simona and Gavin, thank you very much for your time today. We have overrun, but there's a lot of interest in this, and that's great to see that people are still embracing that dream of moving to Portugal. And we hope that the information today has proved helpful to move forward with that. So thanks everybody for your time today. You will be able to find details on our website over the course of next week with some follow-up information about this webinar. And we do hope you found it useful. Judging from all the questions, there is a need for information for you all. So thanks for your time today. Thank you again to our panelists. Goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from them.
Bye-bye.